It's time for what you've all been waiting for. It's time for February 14th patch review. Quite a lot of things happened. We had a balance patch. We had the trading post improvement going over to the Chromium embedded framework, except actually we didn't. We had some world versus world rewards, and we had a whole lot of bugs. We're going to go over all of that right now, and we're going to start off, I think, in a good place with the world versus world rewards. Now, I think I've got to tell the story about this. The story is so good. Gamers, for a few hours on that beautiful, beautiful Tuesday evening, world versus world had good gold per hour. Yes, you heard it correctly. You had loads of extra world XP. You had loads of crafting materials for everything. Everything. You had loads of, you had tier 6, you had tier 3. You had it all. You had extra tickets. It was amazing. It was incredible. Bad news. Unfortunately, it appears that they were a little bit too powerful. They were a little bit stronger than ArenaNet were perhaps expecting, and even though they did actually get reintroduced, you can see here a little while, the system got fixed and turned back on again after it got disabled. It got nerfed pretty significantly in terms of the overall amount of loot you're getting, and of course the world experience as well. Now, I'm willing to accept that, okay, yeah, maybe it was a bit overtuned, particularly around Stone Mist Castle. However, I think this adjustment is definitely a little bit overkill. It really got hit with a bit of a hammer, I'm not gonna lie. Way harder than I thought, and definitely kind of validating the fears of many of the Doomers, and I understand people being frustrated. I really hope they take another pass at this, actually, and get it to a more wholesome place. I think it's definitely potentially true that they're kind of trying to hold off on dumping all rewards into one system, and they might be looking at ways to kind of spread that out over multiple different areas, not just this one thing. However, I do think the overall idea is still very solid. You basically get bonus loot when you take over objectives, when you defend objectives, all that kind of good stuff, which I think is it's a good system, and it of course encourages player conflict. It's very centralized about fighting other players. The more players you fight, the more participation you get, the more loot you get. The bigger structure you take down, the more loot you get. Very cool idea, very nice. Definitely needs a bit of a look though, because unfortunately, it has been memed. I think it is worth noting here is that ArenaNet did quickly swap out the reward bag that you get to a different one. It used to be basically like crafting material caches, and they changed it to heavy supply bags, which are way less valuable. They did that because they were concerned and they wanted to swap it out quickly to avoid damage to the economy. So I think it actually is quite likely that they maybe even make a custom reward bag for this kind of stuff to get the rewards where they want them to be. Overall, I do think a positive change, and I hope to see more improvements to the world versus world reward structure overall. However, definitely right now, world versus world players, you had your 4 hours of good rewards. Hopefully, we see that improved over time. I think particular care should be given to the world experience rewards, as I think these are really, really good for new players in particular. World versus world rank is very important to the reward structure. The more rank you have, the more pips you get, which allows you to progress very, very quickly through the weekly reward structure, which is the main source of your world versus world skirmish tickets, which enables you to get on your legendary armor, your ascended gear, and so on. And I really think that allowing players to level up quickly is very important. I think I would like to see them either put the world experience back, or if they're worried about the rewards there, simply reduce the amount of rewards you get for ranking up, so you still rank up really quickly, but the rewards are where they want them to be. Because again, I really think it's important that players can get their mount unlocked, get gliding unlocked, get auto loot unlocked, all the important stuff that a new fledgling world versus world player needs. It's all very tied to your world versus world rank. So I'd like to see them look at that to basically make ranking up fast, because I think it's very good for new players if that's the case. But yeah, stay tuned on this. We definitely haven't heard the last about the world versus world rewards. Simple as that. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the balance patch. Now, I wouldn't say this is the most impactful balance patch overall to the metagame. I think, broadly speaking, if you want the kind of TLDR here, not much here has really changed as such. It's relatively minor impact to the meta. The one exception to this would actually be Catalyst. So CMC had a go here at nerfing down Catalyst. It was a pretty disgustingly broken build, so overpowered that you would run 5 of them as a meta comp, literally 5 Catalysts on your PvP team. There was an attempt to address this by increasing the cooldown of the elite skill, which allows you to reset all of your elemental abilities, increasing the cooldown on the Jade Spheres, reducing the barrier on Fortified Earth, right? All this kind of stuff. And of course, some general damage reduction here for PvP, so less damage on Dragon's Tooth, lower charges on Ward's Trident for lower sustain and damage output on Catalyst, and lower blind spam as well on Blinding Flash. Now, that wasn't enough. It wasn't. As it turns out. As predicted, unfortunately for the Catalyst fans, CMC is back with a bit of a vengeance. We now see round 2 of the Catalyst nerfs coming through all the way at the bottom here, and I think these are a little brutal, actually. We actually have one with air. The super speed duration is going down from 3 seconds to 1.5 in PvP. Elemental Epitome, you only get 2 seconds of Shocking Aura and Magnetic Aura instead of 3. You get 2 seconds of resistance on Rock Barrier, which is set to 2 instead of 4, and Elemental Celerity cooldown goes back to exactly where it was at 90 seconds. Now, I think this actually should put Catalyst much more in line with everything else, actually. One of the really big things that was problematic with Catalyst was how uninteractive it was. It would run away from you. It was uncatchable. It was incredibly fast. You couldn't lock it down. Or in any way kind of inhibit it because of the resistance uptime, because of the super speed uptime. It was very hard to nail it down and punish it. Now, I think this build is much more vulnerable. It's much more attackable, right, for other builds. And I think that actually really helps with actually getting this build in line. We'll have to see how it actually ends up performing. Like, it's one of these things that I think is quite difficult to balance. It's entirely possible that this has kind of pushed it over the edge, and now it's just going to be too squishy and too vulnerable to really get any kind of good value, because in general, things are pretty tanky and durable now, and it's had such a hit to its sustain and kite ability that it might be in a bit of a weird spot right now, but we'll have to see. This should actually fix it, at least temporarily. It is, of course, a little bit unfortunate that some of these changes are to core Elementalist, as this, of course, nerfs every version of Elementalist, including Fresh Air Weaver, which is kind of a fun build that hasn't necessarily been a problem overall. But yeah, looking at the interactivity of Catalyst is important. Less Shocking Aura, less Magnetic Aura, less Invulnerability, less Super Speed, less Resistance. Like, these are all things that were causing issues there. So, there it is. That's honestly the really big thing for Elementalist, I would say. The staff reworks, honestly, really cool. I've been playing around a little bit on Heal Tempest. Definitely feels like a fun build to play, actually. And I think that if you are going to be playing Heal Tempest, yeah, you're going to want to have a staff now. There are definitely some situations where it's like, oh, yeah, I really want to have some stability here. And by the way, you can get a lot of stability on your Heal Tempest. Because bear in mind, gamers, Transmute is not just the flip over skill from Magnetic Aura. This means any time you give yourself a Magnetic Aura, you have a 10-second cooldown where you can give stability. So, for example, if I'm going to use my Aftershock, you'll see that I actually get the flip skill, and now I can use it. But hang on, I've got another Magnetic Aura. That means that if I go ahead and wait a little while, and I apply my Magnetic Aura again, good news, I've now got my stability application back very, very quickly. This is, of course, true for my Overload as well. So now if I Overload, or see that pulsing alacrity, we love to see it, you also have another round of stability here. So Tempest actually has some very nice stability access now when you have a staff equipped, particularly if you have multiple sources of Magnetic Aura up at the time. And again, this is long radius as well. This is a 600 radius with 2 stacks of quite a nice duration, actually. As you can see here, 12 seconds. I'm at 100% boon duration. I'm not exactly on... Let me get my... Yeah, here we go. Here's a Heal Tempest build. I'm at 100% boon duration, and you can see that the duration is going to go up to about 12 seconds when you are fully geared up and ready to go. So actually a really nice addition to this build, and that's not all, of course. We also have super speed now on Windsworn speed, which is really nice. So Tempest has got some sick super speed access now as well, actually. Check this out. So we can just run around like crazy and give our allies super speed, and then give even more super speed, of course, with our Eye of the Storm at the same time. So really, really good there. Bear in mind, this is a short 20-second cooldown on Windborne speed as well. We have better control of our CC with our Gust. We have Frost Aura guaranteed now, which is more boon application from Invigorating Torrents and more damage reduction on our Frozen Ground. Oh, we're just having a good time, guys. We're having a good time. And this is also really nice too. Notice this. Our Water Blast at last is now targetable on allies. So now, if a player is far away, I can go ahead and target them with my Water Blast and heal them. Previously, you'd have to do some really weird stuff. This is like a class. Check this out. This is a classic Heal Tempest technique. Look at this. What you would do is you would actually aim like this. Basically like this. Like simulating action cam by holding right click, and you could hit people far away from you. I used to see Plenix do this all the time, actually, right? When he was a big Heal Tempest fan. So you would aim at people like this by pivoting your camera. However, now you can simply just click on people, target them, and you can now heal them at range in addition to your normal heal with Geyser. And even better, more healing. You remove condies, you heal people now with Healing Rain, which now removes for every condition removed, which is very, very powerful actually on any fight that has a lot of condition application. Just like some general, really, really nice buffs across the board to this build. And as a result of this now, there's a bit of a trade-off, right? You have your Dagger Warhorn setup, which has better boon application with Heatsink, and your Sand Squall over here, which is the boon extension, of course, on your Warhorn. However, if you don't need as much boon application, you can then swap into the Staff, which is going to give you higher healing, ranged healing, as well, and of course that additional stability access. So obviously I love this. This is great. You've got a meaningful build decision to make depending on what encounter you might find yourself on as a Heal Tempest, and it kind of fills in one of those gaps in a classic support build, right? Now you have really nice stability, loads of super speed, but not all at once, right? This is kind of the holes in rolls kind of thing, and the power budgeting that ArenaNet was talking about. You don't want to have a build that does everything. You want to have, oh yeah, on this, with Staff, you can do this. And with Dagger Warren, you can do that. So overall, I'm a big fan of this. Also, it's quite nifty for World vs. World 2. Just want to throw that in here as well. Actually, as of course now in World vs. World, you just have a bit more utility. Elementalist in World vs. World is a bit of a utility piece. It's massive damage output, but also utility. You snare enemies by chilling them, immobilizing them, all that kind of good stuff. And of course, throwing some free condition cleanse out there on your Weaver or your Catalyst. And now you're just a little bit better at doing that with your super speed, bit of stability application, all that kind of good stuff. So really fun for Ellie in World vs. World 2. I've actually, check this out. Now, don't quote me on this, because I've only heard rumors about this. I've even heard a few rumors that people are trying out Tempest in PvP with Staff with these changes because of the stability access and of course the super speed allowing you to kite very nicely in PvP. I'm a little skeptical of that. I do think that having the invulnerability and the sustain and the excellent control of Dagger Focus is always going to be amazing. Gust, Obsidian Flesh, Magnetic Surge, all that kind of good stuff, and Shocking Aura, of course, on the Dagger 3. That is amazing. Right? But I have heard it's being experimented with and might be a significantly better option, actually, for your Staff enjoyers in PvP. So that's it. And actually, this is kind of a, you might think, wow, that was a very large Elementalist segment, Teapot. Wow, that's crazy. And you're definitely not wrong. I would say that Elementalist is definitely the class that's got some of the most love. And actually, we're not done yet. All of this stuff, see this? These are numbers. Weaver is absolutely cracked in PvP right now. I believe it's doing around 42,000 DPS, and its burst, I believe, is approaching 50,000 DPS for the first 20% hit points on the Golem. Weaver, absolutely insane in PvE. It is absolutely crazy. It really, really is. So much damage right now. If you like Weaver, good news. Weaver likes you. It's very, 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 very good. Currently, so if you like Weaver, there you go. And the big quality of life change that we're talking about as well is Lucid Singularity. Now, whenever you use an overload, you actually pulse out Alacrity, and then you have like a final pulse of Alacrity at the end. Just really nice quality of life, makes Heal Tempest. Doesn't really change the balance of Heal Tempest, in my opinion, but makes it a little bit more flexible, a little bit more you know, a little bit more fun to play, a little bit less annoying to play around. I believe there actually is a bug right now where it's not applying quite as much alacrity as it should, but I'm sure they'll clean that up pretty quickly. Overall, very, very positive for Elementalist. Few nerfs to Earth Shield in PvP. Don't worry, this is a PvP change because Earth Shield's kind of uninteractive, a little bit too broken there as well, particularly when you share it with allies. So a few nerfs to Earth Shield overall, but I actually don't think the PvP meta has shifted a crazy amount with regards to Elementalist. It's still going to be very strong. Tempest is still the dominant support. Firebrand hasn't caught up to it yet. But Catalyst definitely taken down a notch a little bit. But I think that's about it for our beautiful Elementalist fans there to kind of sum things up here. So, in terms of Engineer, this one actually very, very straightforward. Don't even have to log onto my NG for this. Condi NG, super good. Aftercast reduction on Fragmentation Shot and Poison Dart Volley is going up as well in terms of its speed. Basically, Condi Engineer, specifically Condi Mech, is absolutely crazy because now Chemical Rounds, Serrated Steel, and Incendiary Powder all apply to the mech. This makes this the premier DPS build for Mechanist, and it does a lot of damage. Very, very strong if you like this conditioned playstyle with your mech, and I think it's actually a pretty good way to have it because the power build is obviously very straightforward to play and does solid DPS. The mech build is still not, you know, it's definitely like approachable, but there's definitely a lot more buttons going on here with Condi Mech. You got to rotate through some kits and so on. Bit of a higher pace build if you're into that sort of thing, and does very, very solid DPS now with all these changes. So, yep, all good stuff. In terms of Scrapper, I actually would like to see the cooldown reduction on Reconstruction Field actually applied to PvE as well, just to give DPS Scrapper and Quickness Scrapper a little bit more defensive utility to the group, because it has to compete with Herald now, which is pretty difficult, so I'd like to see that happen as well. They were trying to bring Scrapper as a bit of a brawler back into play by bringing Rapid Regeneration back to, you know, replacing Damage Dampener. And the goal here was to basically give it a lot more sustain. This trait was pretty scary, and I believe they were fairly conservative with the numbers here. So I don't think it's really like mega insane in PvP as of right now. Maybe I'm completely wrong. We'll see in the monthly pretty soon, I guess. But I don't think it's actually shifted. The PvP meta in general, I don't think appears to have shifted that much. But hey, let's see how well that ages. But, you know, it's cool. I do like the idea of Scrapper being moved away from like a meme one-shot build where you stealth and grenade barrage people, more into that kind of brawler, bruiser style position that I think it's often been associated with, and of course originally was back in Heart of Thorns. And adding some stuff like this back into the game is definitely the way to go about doing this. And a very small buff here to, well, I guess very small, a small buff to pure DPS Scrapper. You now get a ridiculous amount of might, or extra power from might in PvE only. 20 extra power. You get 50 power per stack of might now from Applied Force. Wow. Doesn't buff Quickness Scrapper, just pure DPS. This is a good buff in my opinion, actually. Because as it turns out, pure DPS Scrapper was actually pretty good, but it fell behind because of power creep, and now it's just, I guess, catching up a little bit. Although Hollowsmith is still very, very high DPS. And actually, just while we're on the topic of Hollow, I think it's worth noting, actually, that Hollowsmith, very good in PvP right now, because Catalyst has been nerfed. Hollow is kind of lurking in the shadows, waiting to get in on the action. The Static Discharge Hollowsmith. A very powerful build. Definitely check out the hardstuck.gg guide on that. Yep, there you go. That's it for Engineer. Not too crazy here. Some fun stuff for Guardian, actually. And you can see a lot of numbers here. Let me sum it up for you. It turns out that Dragon Hunter has actually benefited quite nicely from this in PvE. And so has Willbender, especially when combined with the Virtues changes. So, here is the deal. Virtues Willbender, guess what? It's another build on 40k DPS. That's right, gamers. So, with Virtues Willbender, you can now pump 40k. Radiance, I believe, is 36,000 DPS, so definitely very respectable. But Virtue seems to be the way to go in this regard. And you might go, but wait, that's so unbelievably unrealistic. But here's the thing. They changed Unscathed Contender to basically give you 7% while you're above 90% and 7% while you have Aegis. So in other words, it's a lot more realistic to have like a decent uptime of this. as well, especially at least half of the bonus, right? And also bear in mind that one really key thing that happened with Willbender, I'm going to quickly relog to a Guardian here, just to actually show this off, I think. Wait, do I actually have Willbender unlocked on one of these? The weird thing is, I have not played Willbender. Let's see if we actually have it unlocked. Uh-oh, this would be very embarrassing, guys. This is going to be very an embarrassing situation here. But Willbender also has a really cool... I actually do have Willbender. Willbender had a really nice little bonus change that has really helped it out in PvP, by the way, where now you can actually go ahead and use all the virtue effects, and they don't reset. You can see that I'm using all of my virtues now, and I'm still maintaining the bonuses, right? So I'm getting my extra healing, I'm getting the burning still being applied, and of course, the boon application of Aegis and Stability from Crushing Courage. So this is where a lot of the damage on virtues comes from, because basically it allows you to activate this trait here, the Inspired Virtue trait, for another 10% damage after activating a virtue. So you get a lot of value. I actually haven't, look at that, I actually haven't fully unlocked this. That's actually really funny.
I'll need help. Follow me.
That is indeed content. But basically, because you can get so many more virtues, you can now activate this trait a whole lot. You can reduce the cooldown of your weapon abilities, basically, with restorative virtues, which is kind of nice, leading to more damage, and of course, just more uptime of your 10% damage modifier. I think it's worth noting that, of course, you can apply a lot of Aegis to yourself, right, using this, so you can kind of quickly restore your Aegis if you do get hit. So I think Virtues actually is, like, somewhat realistic, actually, to pull off. Certainly, you know, requires a bit of daring, a bit of dodging and so on to maintain that. But overall, I think a very strong build. Bear in mind, you'll also be just providing some incidental boons from Inspired Virtue while playing this build too, which, by the way, actually is pretty relevant. And yes, people are pointing out that it is bugged right now, but look, we're going to be talking about bugs a little bit later, guys, because oh boy, did we have some fun this time around, guys, with the bugs in this patch. Oh yes, we had some bugs. But yeah, overall, really cool stuff for Willbender. I think this is going to make the class a lot of fun to play, and certainly much stronger in PvP, because in PvP, you had to make a lot of decisions. It was like, well, if I use my damage, then I'm not getting my boons anymore, and my sustain is gone. I can't use my F2. You had to kind of be very slow with chaining your abilities together in some sense, or have like very aggressive trade-offs. That really wasn't working out so hot. But now you can actually be very aggressive while, you know, and use your damaging abilities, your damaging virtues, while still having the extra sustain from your F2, while having the boons, the Aegis, and the stability from Crushing Courage as well. So this is a really big quality of life in competitive modes as well for Willbender. I think this is actually going to help bring Willbender, or at least make Willbender significantly more impactful, actually, at least in ranked, if not in competitive play. It will certainly be helping out a lot there. Especially with this really nice change here, too, to Whirling Wrath, where Whirling Wrath previously kind of slowed you down when you use this. Not anymore. Now you can really track your targets there, move through a group in World versus World, and just a bit of quality of life in PvE at the same time as well. So again, really nice changes for Willbenders. You know, I think it's always been a bit of a joke, right? I always mention on Tea Time that, oh yeah, Willbender, the class ArenaNet forgot. Well, good news, they didn't forget you anymore, actually, with some really exciting changes to that. So Willbender enjoyers, rejoice, my friends. Alongside, of course, some improvements for Dragon Hunter. I actually particularly like the reduction cooldown on virtues for Dragon Hunter as well, as this means the defensive utility of Dragon Hunter becomes more powerful. So kind of here's my idea on this. I think ArenaNet want to push Willbender into that kind of Daredevil big damage. I shouldn't say Daredevil because that's a Thief Elite spec, but you know what I mean, right? That, you know, real aggressive build that just gets in there and does damage, whereas Dragon Hunter is a little bit more reserved, a little bit more defensive. Basically, a defensive DPS versus a full all-out glass cannon DPS from Willbender. I think this actually really helps with differentiating that, as Dragon Hunter now has pretty respectable damage. Probably needs a little bit more, I'm not going to lie. There's quite a lot of classes looking at that 40k, guys, and you're just like, oh. But anyway, that's not the point for now. I really like looking at these key defensive abilities and making them a little bit more powerful in PvE, because these are very strong effects, actually. It's this, that people have forsaken the Dragon Hunter, as ArenaNet has forsaken the Dragon Hunter. But looking at those virtues, very, very cool in my opinion. Very, very cool indeed in that regard. And of course, we've got to talk about mantras as well. They tried to bring Firebrand support back in PvP. Not gonna lie, definitely needs more than that. That's all I've got to say. Firebrand, you're still going to get smushed immediately, and feed. Tempest is still the king. That's it. Next! Mantras. So, this is one of the more mechanical changes that's happened. Mantras have got their cast time back. That's the deal. So, what's going on? Now, we're back to normal, right? You can use 2 charges, and then you get your final charge here, which is more powerful. Now, I know a lot of people aren't a big fan of this, but I do think that this is better designed, certainly for competitive modes, and ultimately, I think more interesting and more dynamic and less spammy in PvE as well. And let me explain why. And the perfect example of this is actually the heal skill. Because you know what? Having 3 charges of Aegis on your heal skill, yeah, that was actually kind of busted. I'm not gonna lie, guys. It was a very oppressive ability to the meta. However, having 1 Aegis on the final charge that then allows you to recharge it later, now we're talking. And that's exactly where we are. So if we take a look at this, you'll notice that Rejuvenating Respite, which is the final charge, applies an Aegis, in addition to additional protection and resolution with a 30-second cooldown. And this, in my opinion, is the way that ArenaNet can make these mantras not only more interesting to use, but also balanceable. By making the final charge situational and responsive, that's what can make this exciting. Nobody wants to be in a situation when you simply don't press the final charge. That's lame. We can all agree that. We can all agree with that. Right? I agree with that. It's not good that you just would never use these. What is good is if ArenaNet can find ways to make the final charge sometimes worth it. So you have to evaluate the scenario and then use the final charge. And I think a really good way of doing that is exactly this. Using stuff like Aegis on the final skill here. Immobilize on the final charge of Voice of Truth. 5 stacks of stability on Unhindered Delivery. Because, you know, sometimes you need that massive burst of stability to block loads of incoming control effects. That's really good. I think these are well designed. I think the ones that kind of fall down a little bit right now are Mantra of Flame and a Mantra of Potence, because there's not much of a functional difference on their final charge. They're just like, oh yeah, it does 3 stacks of burning instead of 1. And this one does more quickness, more power. And don't get me wrong, sometimes you want to kind of throw that down and go for an all-out burst. I get that. That's obviously occasionally the case. However, I find myself very unimpressed. I think what could be very interesting here is either adding another boon. So maybe Overwhelming Celerity. I mean, that's a bit scary on Firebrand, but you know what I mean, right? Overwhelming Celerity, what could it give? It could maybe give a little bit of resistance. Maybe. So you would activate the final charge if you need to apply resistance. Because you don't lose quickness uptime, by the way, if you actually use it and then rechannel it. Like, you know, your uptime will still be pretty okay because it gives you like a significantly high amount of quickness. You're not going to run out of quickness by using that. But you might want to reactively use it if there's some need for something else. You could maybe add some boon extension, maybe, instead. And on Mantra of Flame, the idea I actually had for this was to actually differentiate one of them from sustained damage and the other one towards burst damage. So in other words, you would use the normal charge just as a DPS increase, but the final charge, I think it would be really interesting if it was a very short burn, maybe 3 seconds, or maybe even 2 seconds, but a very high amount of stacks. So in other words, you would use Flame Rush for sustained damage output, and you would use Flame Surge for burst damage output instead. So in other words, make the final charge a DPS loss overall, but have a very high burst. I'm not saying that's exactly what they should do, but what I'm saying is that this is the type of design that I think can really make these exciting and really make the mantra changes, make the class feel more dynamic instead of just having, oh yeah, I press a button every 7 seconds. Because look, you may not like these changes, and I think that's totally fair, but let's be honest. Having Mantra be like, oh, I press button every 7 seconds, not very exciting, and to be frank, not the best design to have on your class. So overall, I'm actually in favor of the mana changes. I was not happy when they removed this. I'm not just saying that now because I am an ArenaNet simp. I have always been against removing the cast times from mantras because it just reduces counterplay, makes it less dynamic. Abilities are just less reactive and less thought goes into how you actually use your abilities, which I think is lame. But anyway, that's the deal with Guardian. And on Mesmer, I guess we might as well stay on mantras here, on Mesmer here as well, because Mesmer mantras are a little bit different. And in some ways, I think these are actually a little bit difficult for ArenaNet to balance in the same way that I would attack, that I would attack these mantras from Firebrand, because there's almost like less of the ability to make them reactive, because the kind of weird thing is on a long cast time, which makes it hard to make these reactive in some way. I think they've done a somewhat okay job of it with Concentration Mantra, because this ability now, when you charge it, is going to give an Aegis. You can see here. You can see there, guys. We apply a little bit of Aegis, which is pretty cool, right? And then you just use these here to get your, to get your memes. I think the one thing that's actually really important to think about here with Mesmer mantras, by the way, is that this is the trade-off. You can either wait to get a charge very slowly. You can see here, right? Look at this mantra of stability. Check this out. 30-second recharge, or you can double cast it and get it back in 15. Do you see, right? So if I use two of these, if I use one charge, well, I can wait 30 seconds to get my charge back, or I can use it again, and then I'll have it back in 15, but then you've got to rechannel it. So that's the trade-off there. This typically fits a little bit more into support builds, and this is why they're trying to push the heal Necromancer build, which, by the way, actually, after this, is quite serviceable with the increase to its might output as well. Hey, heal Chrono, it's on its way. Eventually, we're going to get there, right, guys? Oh, yeah, let's go. So that's kind of the deal with what's going on here. So I think that some of these mantras are actually pretty interesting. It's just that the trade-off is a little bit different, and is almost a little bit... it's going to feel a bit weird on certain DPS builds. But to be frank, if you want my actual evaluation, in a lot of ways, this makes the mantras, especially the stability mantra, more powerful. Because it means that ultimately, if you're smart about it, and you know, oh, there's going to be some downtime where I'm going to have time to rechannel my mantra, if you're smart about it, you can actually get a lot of value out of this. I mean, yeah, just think about this, right? You have a 15-second cooldown stability application, right? You can just double cast it, and then boom, you can get your Aegis and stability back in 15 seconds very, very quickly. And that's 5 seconds of 4 stacks of stability and an Aegis on a very short cooldown with Alacrity. Yes, you are obviously going to eat a bit of damage for it, or you're going to have some downtime on whatever you're doing. However, this is actually a very powerful ability if you kind of use it well. Right, so I think that is interesting. And this is kind of true for a lot of the other ones, like the cleanse one, for example. You can full cleanse yourself and AoE cleanse whenever you rechannel it here too. Pretty interesting stuff there as well. And the Mantra of Pain, the big highlight here of Mantra of Pain is that it gives 8 might stacks in a radius here. And allow me to briefly complain here, guys. This is a tangent, and this is not a Mesmer thing, this is an everything thing. ArenaNet must think about boon application radius in PvE. In PvP, it's not as important because you don't stack on top of each other all the time, but there is a huge difference between Herald, which applies more or less all of its boons in a 600 radius, quickness in 360, compared to poor old Chrono that applies might in a 240 radius. These things are not the same. And I do think this is a bit of a thing that ArenaNet have kind of missed out on, right? Like, they have missed out on ease of application. It is true, guys. Look at Tides of Time. Good skill. Quickness, swiftness, might. 8 might. Pretty good. You love to see it. I like it. Very nice. But this is not the same, okay, as something that has 600 radius, guys, right? That's it. In fairness, Tides of Time actually is a 360 boon radius, so I should not have used this as an example. Look, that's how long I haven't played Chrono for, guys. I abandoned Chrono a long time ago. I remember when you actually had to hit people with the shield to apply boons to people. Now, that really was a clown fiesta. But anyway, you get what I'm trying to get at here, right? A lot of builds have very small application radii for their boons. I mean, look at the wells, right? The wells on Chrono are a good example. See, I'm not a complete Bepega. 240 radius, okay? Compared to 600 on other things. This is a little bit of an issue, I think, and it definitely needs to be brought up in terms of the balance concerns here, because Chrono is one of those builds that I look at and I go like, all the pieces are here, but the pieces are a little bit scuffed. For example, we have protection on shield. We have might, swiftness, fury as well on dueling, 2 on Chronomancer. We have all these really nice pieces, but it's 240 radius protection on the Phantasm here. And the Phantasm can also spawn in a weird location and just not correctly apply the protection. Why isn't it 360? Could even be 600 in PvE, to be honest, right? Why is that not the case? Why is the Might on the Mantra, which is kind of nifty on heal Chronomancer, 240 radius compared to, say, well, I mean, the allied boon radius? Not a lot of people know this, by the way, guys, but I'll actually go on my Ranger to quickly show this off. Check this out. Check this out. Not a lot of people know this, but the boon radius on Call of the Wild, which applies Fury, Might, Swiftness, and Regen, is 900. That's right, guys. Not even 600. Look. 900. Look at that. What was that, guys? You see that? 900. Compared to our Chronomancer's pathetic 240. Okay? Like, yeah. That's right. Enjoy that. Embrace it. I believe that applies to Clarion Bond too. Yes, it does. That does apply to Clarion Bond as well, guys. And of course, all of our spirits are also very large radius as well. You can see the boon radius is 600 on our spirits. Now, I'm not saying that everything needs to be 600, but it needs to be considered in the balance. The way that you balance needs to include range and application methods. Very, very important to do this. Okay, right. Brief tangential rant. Done. Back to our Mesmer. Back to the Mesmer. Okay. There we go. Okay. So, that's all that stuff. Talked about mantras. Blah, 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 blah. Heal Chrono kind of in the mix now. It's almost there. Chrono is the almost there build, right? That's all I've got to say. It really is nearly there. Some stuff also happened with some of the traits. Basically, they brought back Temporal Enchanter. Bit of a classic. Bit of a classic trait now. You now apply super speed and resistance whenever you drop down a glamour, which basically is the classic Veil. Basically, you put down your Veil in World vs. World, and then boom, everyone runs through it, gets their stealth, and away they go. This is very much, I think, a change that was oriented at World vs. World. There was like a weird change, and actually, this change actually is worth bringing up here. Okay, we gotta talk about Echo of Memory here and what they did with this. This is weird. So, when you block, the Phantasm gets summoned immediately. So, here's the weird thing. This has now produced a bizarre interaction. Now, the optimal way to play Chronomancer for DPS is to get a block, or Boon Chronomancer, get a block, and then immediately cancel your block, and then do the exact same thing again. I am not a huge fan of weird stuff like this being added to the game, in my opinion. Because this is just such a somewhat strange mechanic that I think is a bit unintuitive to be part of the, I guess, quote-unquote optimal playstyle. Bit of a weird one, if you ask me. But there you go. There you have it. Anyway. At least you have 1,000,000 might on Chronomancer. Look at that, guys. 8 might and fury on Well of Action, and you can take dueling for even more fury. Wow. 25 might, fury, quickness or alacrity, swiftness. Insane. And protection too. I mean, look, that's a build right there. Loads of good Mesmer utility. Like I said, Mesmer really is a slightly weird... It's in a very weird place. Any class that can apply this much might should never be underestimated. It really, really shouldn't. It's one of the reasons why Mirage is so strong. But anyway, that's basically it for Mesmer, I think. Wow. I think they still need to do some more work on this one. They do. It needs a little bit more work. Necromancer. Bad news. Honestly, not much happened. This is going to be a quick one. They made Dagger a little bit better. The floor on Dagger is up. Dagger's pretty cool for open world Necro builds, I think, actually, in general, and now it's better. Warhorn cooldown's actually pretty nice, just for Scourge builds in particular that typically have a Warhorn offhand. It's kind of nice. Again, doesn't really change that much in PvP rather, because I think you actually ran this trait anyway on the core Necro builds, because you want the duration increase for more fear application and more damage on the Terramancer setups. But overall, it's kind of nice overall, I guess. Life Silent Dark Pact, slightly more flavorsome, very, very nice. Doesn't really help that much for any of, like, the Reaper builds, for example, because you don't use Dagger on Reaper, I'm afraid. They really should figure out what they want to do with Reaper. Reaper is just one of those things that it's just like, what do they want it to be? What do they want? Do I want to use Staff? Axe? Dagger? Greatsword? I don't know. I'm not sure if ArenaNet knows. But I'm sure we'll find out at some point. The shouts got reworked. I actually think basically nothing happened with this. With these shout changes. And Blight has been chilling victory. I don't think this did anything, to be honest. I guess they've got flavor. I do like the flavor. I do. I do, actually. When you're in melee range, all of a sudden, boom, the shouts are better. And having a base cooldown of your Soul is Mine being 16 seconds, actually is pretty cool. It's nice in PvP. Helps Reaper get a bit more sustain, so you can get your life force back faster, get your really big healing faster as well. Pretty good. That's not that bad. However, not gonna lie, you're not gonna use these shouts in PvE for damage. The Wells and the Signet are gonna be better. Suffer could potentially actually be pretty interesting as a very strong condition management tool now in competitive modes, actually, because that's a lot of condies on a very short cooldown. The melee range is... The melee range is very small. You have to basically be standing on top of your opponent to get the melee range, by the way. It's like 130. I thought it was going to be 240, but it's 130. So it is actually quite difficult to connect these and a bit weird considering that shouts are ranged as well. But that is something. It is something. You use a shout in PvE? Like over the Signet? Really? Oh, you're all weaklings? Yeah, I guess so, actually, because... Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about this, because I saw, the damage is pretty good on this, actually. And because you don't get the Signet in Shroud, yeah, I could see that, actually. I actually could see that. Because it does quite a lot of damage, doesn't it, actually? Okay, I take it all back. I take it all back, guys. Reaper. Buffed. I mean, I actually have one thing to say about that. It means you do have a stun break in your kit, actually. Of course, you are going to basically spam out of cooldown for damage in melee range, but still, having a stun break is always nice, I guess. A little bit of a nice little bonus meme for Reaper. Probably a very minor DPS increase, I guess. For good old Reaper. You love to see it. Wow, very exciting. Yeah, honestly, not that much for Necro. It's basically exactly where it was. Ranger. So, big news for Ranger here. All this stuff, a little bit mushy. You know, blah, 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 blah. Numbers, numbers, numbers. Whatever does it mean? Well, number one, Signet of the Hunt, probably a little bit spooky. Super speed and unblockable on a 30-second cooldown, pretty good. But I have bad news. Bad news for Untamed fans. This ability, you know, when you see a change like this, you might look at it and go, wow, this can't possibly be a big deal, right? There's no way. There's no way this could be a 0.25 second cast time, not instant anymore. But let me tell you something, gamers. Oh, yeah. This was a big one. This was actually a colossal... This single change was a massive nerf to Untamed, like obliteration. And this is because it's easy to forget this. But instant cast is amazing. Being able to always use a skill, no matter what, is amazing. It's ridiculously good. And essentially, this ability was core to the Untamed playstyle in competitive. You would pre-cast an ability, like a very high damaging ability or a stun, and then BAM! Teleport onto someone mid-cast and land it immediately. And you know what? I'm sorry. I've got to kind of say this. Untamed was very uninteractive because of this. And we know that ArenaNet are targeting uninteractive builds right now. So this is very much in line with what they want to do. They want to remove this uninteractive stuff from the game as much as they possibly can. And Untamed was causing a lot of problems. They could have maybe gone the other direction and reduced the damage instead. So it wasn't, wouldn't just get like one tap basically by like an Untamed teleporting onto you and just instantly killing you alongside the pet. But yeah, it's kind of like this combined with the pet teleporting at the same time into some like really damaging pet abilities. It was just a bit too much, to be honest. Untamed is in a weird spot. Untamed is just one of those elite specs that's just kind of cobbled together from a bunch of different ideas. And as a result of that, it's a bit of a nightmare to actually deal with for ArenaNet. You know, we see this with the Grandmaster trait, with Fervent Force. It's just weird. However, Untamed mains, you may be in shambles, but good news. You can just swap to Soul Beast. This, honestly, Condi Soul Beast could well be a bit of a monster right now in PvP. A long time ago, actually, it was actually played by Zintrex a fair bit as a duelist, funnily enough, that ran a lot of stances. And now, the cooldowns of all the stances have gone down, alongside the durations, and Primal Cry now is poison as well. 3 stacks of poison. That's a lot of damage, by the way, on this ability. This ability is absolutely huge with this stuff. And Ranger also got more sustain with Rugged Growth, as you can see here. Now getting, whenever you have protection, you gain 196 health per second, up from 155 as well. So, actually, very, very powerful setup here. Overall, for this duelist build. Definitely an option for all of the depressed, untamed mains. Go and bully some people in some 1v1s with your condition damage Soul Beast. And as a very quick note here, by the way, in general, lower duration proportional to cooldown makes an ability better. Because think about it like this. When you use an ability, how often do you get the full value out of it? And when I say full value, means none of it times out. So in other words, if you've got like 5 stability stacks and only 3 of them get used, you get hit by 3 CCs, for example, and you still got a few stacks over, you're kind of wasting some of the stacks, right? Essentially. Or, you manage to avoid the CC and then there's no more CC for the remaining 3 seconds. Use stability, you block some stuff for 3 seconds, but then in the remaining 3 seconds, there's nothing left, right? This is why having shorter durations with a lower cooldown typically is going to give you better results, especially if that ability happens to be a stun break, because that means you can use your stun break more frequently rather than having this like really big monolithic cooldown that takes a while to come back. So overall, the stance changes make the stances just better. Even if the duration's going down, the stances are still better in competitive. And well, yeah, this is indeed the case with all of them. So good news for all you Soul Beast fans. You love to see it. Very, very nice. Okay, let's move on to what is going on with Rev. The really big stuff with Rev is actually going to be Alacrity Renegade. Gamers, good news. I think this has actually been one of the builds that people have missed the most, I believe, actually. And that is, of course, Alacrity Renegade. The 10 target to 5 target change kind of killed this build, right? Like that boon change kind of killed this, more or less. But good news, guys. Good news. Alac Renegade is very much back on the menu, actually. As the big change that kind of came in late, as we scroll down here, you can see it. Alacrity duration has gone up from 1.5 to 2 seconds in PvE. Wow. What does this mean? This means that instead of needing, I believe, around 75% boon duration you now only need 33% boon duration to upkeep Alacrity. So here I am on a nice, cozy, open world build for my Renegade. I've got 6 boon duration. This is actually overkill. I'd actually changed the rune on this now. And you can see that, boom, I press my F4, and wow. Look at that, gamers. Is that not just beautiful? Look at that. Insane. Mega Alacrity output, of course, on my entire team at the click of just one button. Doesn't that just make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside? We're back where we belong. And of course, this reduction in boon duration requirement translates to a very high DPS increase. The Alacrity Renegade build condition variant is now doing 33,000 DPS, which is very high for an Alacrity build. Alongside, of course, bring in its usual respectable utility and range damage. We have boon removal on Banish Enchantment. We have good CC with our pull attack here, our short bow 5 for a knock, and of course, Dark Razor's Daring, thrown into that too. Even our Axe 5 here. Great AoE damage, and some solid support here as well. You can see here that we can drop down our heal skill. A very nice pulsing heal, right? Look at that, 10 pulses of 800 healing with Break Razor's Bastion and reduced incoming condition damage. And of course, your usual Soul Cleave's Summit elite skill to really just give your allies a bit of passive sustain alongside all of that. Very, very, very strong indeed, actually, as a build. And definitely very much back where it probably wants to be. With some very solid damage output, and of course, the respectable utility that kind of has been associated with Renegade for a while now. Doesn't have the best boon application ever, but they did actually give it some additional fury. Now, Endless Enmity, which is the minor trait in Renegade, as you can see here, now gives AoE Fury when you get a critical strike, which will actually give very high Fury uptime. You can see here that I'm at 60% duration. I'm getting basically 75% Fury uptime. On a more optimized build, it's going to be over 50% Fury uptime just from this, which is actually very, very nice indeed. Very lovely stuff. And a bit of a buff to Power Renegade 2 for PvE. You get 10% critical hit chance all the time, basically. So when you dodge, you don't get punished quite as hard. And of course, the reduction in boon duration requirement for Power Rev means that you can probably have a much easier time getting to that crit cap, just regardless anyway, right? While still having boon duration. So this is just actually a buff to both of these Renegade builds. I think the condition build is definitely the one that is looking stronger right now overall, but definitely some pretty convenient as well if you are a Power Renegade enjoyer, which also did fall off very, very hard. In terms of competitive, there were some Renegade buffs as well. I've heard that it's pretty okay, or like a solid build, not necessarily like an amazing build. Just some damage increases on the second skill, Bloodbane Path on Shortbow, and 7-shot getting a little bit of its damage output back as well. I've heard it's decent. Right, the might output, you have to really use this ability a lot to generate a lot of might on Heroic Command and then just blast people down with your shortbow abilities. Hopefully we don't get back to the ultimate French meta, like 10 Renegades in every single game. We can only hope. The other big thing for Rev was actually, again, PvP. The main attack here was trying to make the Vindicator not a kind of bunkery build that utilizes the Salvation trait line by attacking the barrier application from Salvation alongside the base damage to basically kind of force you to play a more aggressive build. Basically, now the build that I think you're going to be playing on Vindicator is going to be Devastation. Actually looked pretty strong. I was watching Boyce play this in Ranked, and yeah, in Ranked, he was kind of slaying with it. To be fair, he slays with everything, but it seems very much a little bit perhaps more appropriate for the playstyle and the vision for what Vindicator is going to be, rather than kind of an annoying roadblock that just isn't that much fun to engage with, to be frank. So leaning into that more aggressive playstyle should end up being pretty good, but of course overall a nerf as well. The numbers are going down. They're not going up. But yep, that's it for Revenant as well. And yeah, this Imperial Impact, I think this is like this change here is kind of like a precast that I think ArenaNet were really worried about, they were really worried about this trait being really problematic and Vindicator being like insanely sticky and almost like inescapable. This trait did see some play. I saw Souls play this in Vindicator, but I think a lot of people were already playing the damage dodge anyway. With this stuff, so, well, that definitely won't happen. I guess maybe they were worried about some kind of condition build as well, potentially, but hard to say. CMC's brilliance knows no bounds. I simply don't question it. Thief! Big change here for Thief. was that you now get normal steel on Daredevil. So you just get 1200 range steel again, essentially. That's what this is when you're playing your Daredevil. Conde Daredevil got some buffs, just some more damage over here with Imperium Daggers. This is true in PvE as well, of course. Just more DPS. Deadeye does more damage too in PvE with the rifle, so your ranged option is superior. Really nice quality of life that your Deadeye's mark is no longer removed when the Deadeye goes into the down state as well, because that happens quite a lot when you're an 11k melee glass cannon with no utility. So watch out for that one. I think the jury's a little bit out on steel, by the way, in PvP and World vs. World, kind of the competitive style. Obviously, more range in PvE is almost always going to be good. Unblockable has, I guess, less utility in PvE than it does in competitive. The jury's out. This is my read on this. The Thief players I've talked to said they're having more fun on Daredevil. That's what I've heard. So they're happy. They feel full of joy with steel being back. I always do suspect, actually, that this is kind of a nerf, because unblockable is really powerful. There's obviously quite a lot of things that block, and being able to guaranteed interrupt that, utilizing the trickery trait line, is incredibly powerful in general, for just kind of busting through people. But 1200 range is not to be sniffed at as well. That kind of surprise attack, really being able to gap close and then finish someone off, is also very potent. So definitely kind of, a buff nerf, right? It's a trade-off between the two. In that regard for PvP. Not much else really happened for PvP, in my opinion. I don't think the signet traits are super impactful for competitive. Yeah, you can do Basilisk Venom, right? But of course, that's way less frequent, right, than Swipe, right? Because, like, Swipe is, very frequent. And doesn't require you to use your elite skill either. But yeah, Basilisk Venom still kind of gets the job done. Just some general quality of life in PvE for Deadeye 2. Like, Keen Observer. Like, Thief was so weird. You had about 1 million modifiers that you have to keep up by not taking any damage. They've now relaxed that just a little bit. And a nice buff to Skelk Venom as well, actually. Skelk Venom is actually a bit of an underrated ability. I'd liken it to Wash the Pain Away on Tempest. You share a Venom to 5 allies. And boom, look at that. 1,200 healing to all of those allies. That's actually very powerful. That's a really nifty thing that a Thief can go ahead and use as a bit of group utility. I'm always in favor of pushing group utility to more glass cannon specs, so they have the option to take some really nice things that can help their team out instead of just being a glass cannon. Because again, as we all know, I've said this 1,000 times, the builds that typically do well are not the glass cannons. They are the builds that do something useful. Yeah, I actually agree with One Bunch in the chat. I was about to seriously, you guys have got to stop watching my stream so you know what I'm going to say. I hate my chat. Why do you do this to me, chat? Yeah, I was just about to say this. The cast time on it is very long. I think it will be pretty nice if they maybe just slightly reduce the cast time on this ability so it could be a bit more usable. But yeah, definitely a good direction here, just in general. It also does have a 240 radius. Maybe we could make Venoms in PvE 360, guys. Maybe we could do it. But yeah. That's it. Some pretty fun stuff, in my opinion, for Thief. And while we're here, actually, I do want to just talk about this. When you go, oh, this is a change that doesn't do anything, think about this from ArenaNet's perspective. With a lot of these changes, they are aiming to raise the floor. They're not saying, we want you to use haste on every single build ever. Yeah, oh yeah, I'm CMC and I love haste on Thief. Yeah. Their goal here is to reduce bad choices. Or rather, make, I guess, like a non-meta choice, non-optimal choice, whatever, less bad, less punishing. Because, look, you guys definitely know this, right? Sometimes you can take a skill that kind of sounds cool, but is absolute trash. Same with traits, right? You can pick a trait or a skill or a weapon that sucks. This is bad, because it means that players can't pick skills that they think are cool. And have a play style that they enjoy. It reduces the amount of options. So when they're buffing just kind of semi-random skills, their goal is for a player to be able to pick a skill and make it work. Right? And make it do something. Even if it's not optimal, it does something. It has a function that can be used. right? And I think that's a very noble goal and very important because, yeah, there are definitely some bad things in the game that really have not kept up with the power creep overall, and that can be a little bit unfortunate. So yeah, I think it's pretty good, right? Before we talk about Spectre, oh, Deadeye. Oh, bit of a situation. This is very similar to Untamed. Oh. Ouch. I mean, this is a demolition. This is a demolition. It's a demolition, guys. It is. It is. Shadow Meld. Deadeye Elite skill no longer removes revealed in PvP and World vs. World. I mean, this deletes Deadeye from PvP. I mean, like, yeah, this kills it. It's dead. It totally dead. This one change, in my opinion, essentially makes the build bad. I mean, maybe Azadome can pull it off, like the Deadeye guy. Maybe he can pull it off. But no, it's dead. So, this ability used to remove revealed. So, you'd get revealed by attacking or someone using a reveal skill on you, and you could remove that. You were able to delete this. I'm not gonna lie. This was very unfun to play against. Okay? Very, very unfun. And CMC spoke about this a little bit on the stream, the balance stream. They didn't like the fact that this was... They want reveal to be the counterplay. So I actually expect them to add more sources of reveal and kind of balance stealth and reveal in a push and pull dynamic to try and make sure that stealth doesn't get out of control and reveal obviously doesn't get out of control as well. And this, of course, is a big rule breaker, right? Now, this is obviously somewhat aggressive, and it's never fun to have essentially a build get nuked. Now, I will say, and this is what you're expecting me to say, a shred of hope for the Deadeye fans. Bear in mind, this gives ArenaNet room to buff Deadeye, right? This gives ArenaNet room to make it better in other ways that aren't as frustrating and uninteractive as Shadow Meld, basically. That's the only hope I can give you. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. Deadeye kind of blasting, though, by the way, guys. Okay. Oh, check this out. I'm leaking this. Give me 1 second, guys. Now, I know this isn't, totally representative, all this kind of crazy, but give me 1 second. I've got to find something. Where is it? I have seen some very strong Deadeye performances. Check this out, guys. You can actually see it. This is an HTCM. NA HTCM, I believe. Check out this Deadeye, yeah? 29k DPS on Deadeye? That's not half bad. I mean, well, it's very good, actually. It's actually, outperforming Vindicator, outperforming Bladestorm here, as you can see, on a 10-minute run. Very nice run. Deadeye is absolutely a very powerful, pure damage dealer, actually, if you're into that sort of thing. Right now. So definitely don't sleep on this build in PvE if you want that pure glass, like all-out glass cannon performance, right? It definitely is there for you, especially with the changes, of course, helping you out in ranged as well. You don't have cleave, that is true, but it does do a lot of single target damage. That's what it is. It is the ultimate single target damage build ever. Insane. Okay, now let's go talk about Spectre. So when I saw these changes, I got a little bit excited for Heal Spectre. That's right, guys. I got hyped for Heal Spectre. I admit it. Because I thought, holy shit, AoE protection on this build. This is amazing. This is the coolest thing ever. Bad news. It does not give AoE protection on Shadow Sap. It only gives protection to the target you target, in addition to barrier. So, I hate to say it, guys. Heal Spectre mains. Put your hype train down. Put it down, guys. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's not there yet. In general, I want this build to be a thing. I want Heal Spectre to be a thing. It needs regen and prop. It's actually, as you can see here, We have Might application. We have Alacrity application. We have Barrier. We have Healing. We have many things. We have Fury. We have Vigor. We have Swiftness. We have a variety of useful things on this build. You have a lot of CC when you go to Pistol. Wow, that's crazy. You have some random utility boons on Well of Bounty. Ooh, exciting. But we are missing out on the really key bread and butter stuff here. And that is regen and prot. If you're going to be a healer, you need regen and prot. And unfortunately, we don't have that. I was definitely excited when I saw the Shadow Sap change. And to be fair, you now have Omega 25 Might stacks, which is quite nice. But you're not the full package yet. Right? You are not the full package on this build yet. Especially seeing as applying your Might is also, you know, you're not using this ability. And this ability is really nice, particularly if you're playing like a DPS Alacrity build. But I don't know. It's a move in the right direction. I could rant about Spectre for a long time, actually, because I personally do quite like this, but it's a cool build. I'm not a Thief fan, but honestly, I do like Spectre, I admit it. And this is a build that I would love to play, either a heal Spectre or a kind of hybrid Spectre style setup. But to me, the Wells, they're just so... It's just like, ugh. Having to spam, like, 3 teleportation abilities that all have different animation times on them, it's just like, what are we doing? Like, what are we... what are we doing here, guys? Like, this is just not where we want to be in terms of like how this build actually plays out. And also, I know this well wasn't that popular, and yes, it was probably kind of unhealthy in PvP, but they kind of made Well of Silence not that good. Yeah. This used to be a very powerful ability because it would annihilate Defiance Bars. I quite like this ability in open world, actually. You would annihilate Break Bars because it would apply slow, weakness, all this kind of good stuff, and really just rip through Break Bars, especially when you're solo, right? But now it's just a 2-second daze, gives you Shadow Force and Cleanse Conditions. And, you know, Condi Cleanse is nice, I guess, and I think they were trying to make this a kind of more of a thing in World versus World, but I just don't think it really works out that way, right? I mean, you drop down a well, I mean, your team kind of runs through it, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I'm not feeling it. I'm not sure about this design change, to be perfectly honest with you. It needs a little bit more juice. To be honest, I'm going to sum it up. I could talk about this for way too long, and it's already been a long time, right? Spectre needs a bit of a pass, in my opinion. They need to look at the design of the wells. They need to look at how these abilities actually work. They need to look at the boon application. Yeah. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be a bad customer, guys. But to be honest, they need to have a bit of another pass. In my opinion, some somewhat significant reworks to Spectre and how it works to make it much more well-rounded with the way it plays out. Maybe make it easier to balance in PvP as well, because I think that it kind of sucks that Spectre just kind of got bludgeoned with a hammer in PvP, that's never fun. Right, that's never fun. I think one really cool idea would be a Grandmaster trait, maybe even like a reworked version of Shade Step. Basically make all of your abilities like 33% weaker, but AoE instead. Right? Something like that. Or something that allows the Spectre to have a bit more of a presence, like a multi-tether, being able to like tether to 5 people at the same time. Honestly, that actually sounds a little bit busted, but it could be fun, right? Something like that, I think would be good. But just in general, in my opinion, there needs to be some design changes. Because, to be clear, let me actually underline this. Spectre is not bad in PvE. It is absolutely not bad. The problem is that it's not that much fun to play. Not a lot of people like it, to be honest. That's the problem you run into with Spectre a lot of the time. The ability skills, the utility skills are just not that much fun, unfortunately. Anyway, that's it for Spectre. Did I miss anything on Thief? I don't think I did. No, I didn't. Okay. I think we're at the end. Is this the end, guys? It's kind of the end. We did it. We've made it all the way through to Warrior. Wow. And the Warrior changes are actually very heavily targeted at competitive here. The really big thing here is that ArenaNet had a bit of a go at Spellbreaker. The defense trait line with the rework made Spellbreaker real good in PvP. The sustain was incredible, and it also hit like an absolute truck. Spellbreaker, even though these number changes are significant, don't worry, Spellbreaker is definitely still very strong in terms of the duelist position and still hits pretty damn hard while also being a bit of a tricky customer. To me, the big highlight is actually the full counter change. That is really loud, isn't it? So, full counter, the way it was previously, would always give you adrenal health. Even if you don't actually land your full counter, all you have to do is absorb an attack. Now you have to land it. This is the big one, because this basically means that the sustain of Spellbreaker has counterplay. And to us, I actually really like this type of design, actually, overall. Because Catalyst is a bit like this too. The Hammer Catalyst build in particular, you kind of slap your hammer, and if you land an attack, you get a heal, but that allows your opponent to dodge the heal. I actually kind of like that type of gameplay. I think that's really cool and really interactive. So very rewarding if you land it and you successfully hit your opponent. But also it's not like, oh yeah, they're just going to get this heal off guaranteed, right? Across the board. They tried to buff Berserker. Honestly, I might have to do like a 5-hour podcast with Nike and some of the warrior mains just about Berserker. Because honestly, Berserker is an absolute mess in PvE. There is just... The build is just bizarre. You've got like King of Fires. You're using Sundering Leap to get an extra fire aura to trigger your internal cooldown now to detonate that fire aura. It's absolutely unhinged, right? I'm not gonna lie. The build is insane. It's one of like the weirdest builds in the entire game by far in PvE. I don't know what the hell's going on there, to be perfectly honest with you. Yeah, it's wild. And they buff Power Berserker a little bit, but Power Berserker is still not very good, guys. There's a lot of work to do here. Warrior needs a lot of work. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say, guys. It needs a lot of work. To actually tidy this away and make it into something sensible. You might even need an expansion, guys. You might need a little bit of an expansion to make Warrior actually get cleaned up here. They're trying to make the quickness thing work, but banners need another pass to make them more playable. The damage output on these builds is weird, and they're some of the gimmickiest builds in the entire game. They're just weird, to be honest with you. It's something. It is something, guys. I do like the Eternal Champion rework. This is actually it's a cool ability. I do like abilities like this. So what this now does is that you get an extra button when you're in Berserk that allows you to leave Berserk early and then re-trigger all of the traits that activate when you enter Berserk. I actually think that's actually pretty cool. That to me is actually pretty exciting. I like that. I do like that, actually. That's kind of fun. It's kind of fun. It is. You love to see it. Stuff like that really changes up your playstyle. That's what a Grandmaster trait should be. It really should be. And I do think that Arena have to be a bit careful with Berserker and PvP in particular. I think they could create a monster very much by accident, just by giving it so much access to invulnerability, basically. Like a lot of invuln with the defense trait line, and just damage immunity. Like when you're popping elite skills, like when you're popping the going in and out of Berserk and you just take no damage, right? Like from, I can't remember what it's called. It's the adept trait. So that is a little bit concerning. They tried to fix martial cadence in PvE. I think they kind of did it at high level. You now get 2 seconds of quickness instead of 3 seconds whenever you unleash your burst skill from Soldier's Focus. Yeah, I mean, Blades One was really messing up the high-level speedrun meta, right? And this is trying to alleviate that a little bit by making it less ridiculous. To be honest, I think this is just one of the dangers of... This is one of the dangers of having quickness on core classes. Because, yeah, on paper this fixes it, but there's probably going to be a way around it, right? You'll run like a very low amount of boon duration and still do an insane amount of damage. You'll take just one banner or something like that that also gives extra quickness to kind of fill it in. And you can argue that, yeah, this is always going to be a bit of a problem, but the issue with having a trait line that the best in slot option for damage is giving quickness and none of the other options do anything, is probably not ideal. There's a bit of a design issue with where martial cadence is. The tactics trait line on Bladesworn is the best damage trait line. This is what's important to understand here, is that you don't take martial cadence to give quickness. You take martial cadence on Bladesworn because there's nothing else to take. So in other words, there's no trade-off because there's nothing to trade off whatsoever. So in general, there needs to be a bit of a rejiggle there. In general, with that one, we'll still be causing issues other than that. And finally, Bladesworn. So, 1. Bladesworn is ranged now, which you might think, wow, this is great. We have some extra range DPS. I love this. This is so good. This is definitely an attempt to help it out in PvP in particular, I think. Like, the changes to the shouts and the elite skill not renewing the shouts essentially, like, kill Bladesworn completely. It's now one of the worst builds in the game, actually, for PvP. So they're trying to bring it back by giving it some more range ability so it can still be effective without having to kind of get right in there and eat all the damage. That's their goal here with this change. Now, bad news. They have changed the animations a little bit to accommodate the range, and it has... Unfortunately, I don't want to say this, guys. It has disrupted the rotation. The warrior mains are not happy. They are displeased. Basically, what's happened here is that some of these abilities have weirdly long cast times or very long aftercasts. I think the really noticeable one is actually Artillery Slash. Previously, this was a very fast ability that you could fire off in quick succession. Now, it's a lot slower than it was previously, and after Blooming Fire, there's a long aftercast. You can see me using that ability there, like this, and it's taken quite a while before I can use my next ability. I mean, it hasn't actually reduced the damage a lot. Okay, let's talk about the facts. As I understand it, it's a 1k DPS loss in PvE. So it's not the end of the universe. However, balancing around fun and things feeling fun to play, right? And this is obviously important too. So I definitely think this is a bit of a look, because I think players are finding this a little bit awkward, right? A little bit on the awkward side. Yeah. It's almost a bit of a shame they can't split cast times. And they can't do it, by the way, guys. Because basically, cast times are quite interesting in this game. It's all locked into the animation. And I don't think they can actually make it different in different games. Because I imagine they don't want this ability, because this ability is now quite a powerful control effect in PvP. They probably don't want this to have a very, very snappy cast time, because they want it to be reactive. That's almost certainly why they adjusted this. But again, obviously in PvE, a little bit less relevant, I guess. Although, at the end of the day, redesigns do happen, and abilities do get repurposed. This may simply be like an adaptation thing, or further iterative process needed to maybe redistribute the damage, so this ability does become a bit more of a utility-focused ability in PvE rather than a damaging skill. But yeah, I'm just reporting on the news here, guys, okay? I'm just reporting on the news with Bladesworn. But it is technically a bit of a usability increase with the ranged increase, but a little bit of a sadness increase with the animation times. Wow. And that's it. I believe we have now done a full review of this balance patch. So, is that it? Oh, wait. No, that's not it. So, we've now got to talk about something that is quite funny and quite important. I guess a little bit of a warm-up. Actually, warm-up time. Warm-up. Something a little lighthearted and fun first. Check this out, guys. You can now randomize your appearance. I actually kind of like that. This is pretty cool. Look at that. And actually, look, it's surprisingly good. I mean, that's, what the hell is that? But it looks pretty good, right? And you can do that on dies, too. Very exciting. Very exciting indeed. Number 2. They said they were going to improve the trading post. Unfortunately, they were not able to add that to this patch, which is a little bit of a shame. I was excited. I was excited, guys, for the brand new trading post. But you know what? I'm actually not going to give him shit for that, right? I'm not going to give him a hard time. At the end of the day, sometimes things go wrong. They do. And I don't think they should be given a hard time for that. They really wanted to ship it to get that trading post more speed and more performant with the new improved framework they're using. But I'm not going to give them a hard time for this. There was probably some kind of issue, some kind of bug that was highly problematic, and they weren't able to get it to actually merge into the main game. Hopefully coming soon, though. Maybe over the next couple of weeks, maybe the next month or so, because I do think that the trading post being more performant is a big deal. Interacting with the trading post and learning to engage with the economy is flat out the most important skill a new player can learn for progressing their account and getting stuff done. No question about that. So making it as unannoying as possible is absolutely paramount. And I really hope that ArenaNet are able to resolve the issues and get the job done ASAP. Now we've got through the slightly funny stuff, I do want to have a little bit of a serious talk here. I do. This patch introduced some of the most severe bugs ever into the game. And I'll preface this, it was fixed. They were snappy on this. They fixed the worst ones very quickly. And credit to ArenaNet on this. But just to give you an idea of how bad this was, all instance PvE broke. Enrage timers vanished. Jumping off the platform on Cairn despawned the boss. Zera, if anyone died to the jumping puzzle in Zera, at 50%, she would reset and it would go again. Harvest Temple Challenge mode didn't reset. So in other words, if you died, the boss would keep on going, right? And I could go on. There are severe Willbender bugs right now. There's a bug with Tempest in the game currently. Mirage clones on Axe took drugs and are now attacking at turbo speed, leading to 30k DPS just by clones auto-attacking. Right? I could go on. But, okay. We need to have a little bit of talk about this. A lot of patches have been introducing very severe bugs into the game recently. And I do think ArenaNet need to look at this because, haha, these are all funny and they're somewhat game-breaking and they fix them quickly, but I am a little bit concerned about this. I'm very concerned that eventually something will get added to the game that, one, they won't be able to fix quickly, or two, will be so severe, even more severe than these, that it will actually cause potential damage to the game and force ArenaNet to take a more aggressive action. If something adds some kind of duplication glitch that just, ridiculously affects the economy, for example, or very severe crashes that were happening, right? Another really good example of this bug, this has now been fixed. Seriously, this was in the game for a long time. And let me tell you about this bug. This is fixed now, so I'm allowed to say it. There was a bug where if a player went into stealth in the pre-game, like the countdown timer in PvP, if you targeted that player, you would get crashed from the game. And this was actually somewhat, it wasn't that abused, to be clear. We're not gonna overreact here, we're not gonna exaggerate, but I heard a lot of occurrences of this happening where people would be deliberately crashing other players in PvP and they simply wouldn't come back. And this turned a lot of PvP matches into ridiculous, 1v5s. Because players were crashing in PvP. This was in the game for a long time. A long time, by the way. I believe it was multiple weeks. This was in the game. That, as much as I love you, ArenaNet, that is not acceptable. Right? No. That is not acceptable. You cannot allow that to happen. And we don't know why this is happening exactly. Game development is hard, right? This is problematic, right? It's very, there are going to be bugs. There always are going to be bugs. And it's always going to be this arms race between, oh yeah, we added this new thing and it's going to break the game. It's going to break the game, but it's okay. Because we could fix it real quick. That's going to happen. But I do think it is getting a little bit worse. The last few patches have been very, very severe. In fact. And some of the bugs do stay and continuously make the game even more buggy over time. And if this is because they're messing around with the engine and they're preparing for DirectX 11, and after DX 11 is in the game, it's going to clean up a little bit, you know what? Okay, I'm willing to take that. I'm willing to get a little bit spooked by some fairly severe bugs every patch until they have DirectX 11 fully integrated. But if this isn't because of that, and it's because of just simply they aren't being able to test these, and these aren't able to be detected ahead of time, then I do think this is something that ArenaNet need to very seriously think about. Bugs are important. Yeah, they're funny. Yeah, they're not always a big deal, but they are a huge part of especially new players, how they view the game. If you encounter something that's bugged or doesn't work properly, that can be very frustrating and seriously put a negative slant on how you view the game and how people outside the game look at the game. Nobody wants to play a buggy mess. Polish is important. Having a smooth, polished gameplay experience, in my opinion, there's nothing quite like it. It's incredibly enjoyable to really have a game that just works really, really nicely. And as a result of that, I do want to see some serious consideration being taken to this. And while we're here, I have to say this. There are bugs that have been in the game for years, right? Or an extreme amount of time. And certainly years. A lot of the Icebrood Saga strike missions have severe bugs, especially with Whisper of Jormag. Fractals, especially the challenge modes, actually, have severe bugs. Raids have a lot of severe bugs. Strike mission challenge modes have a lot of very severe bugs. Professions have long-standing, severe bugs that have been around for years, sometimes. I do think that I'm loving new content. I want to see new things. I want to see balance patches and so on. But I do think this has to be taken into consideration now, because they're starting to pile up and they are causing problems in the game that everyday players will encounter. Not all the time. I'm not saying that you're going to run into a zillion bugs every millisecond, but you do encounter bugs all the time. Frequently. I shouldn't say all the time. You encounter bugs frequently, even in a normal experience, which is not good, if you ask me, guys. I don't think that's really where we want to be in Guild Wars 2. So, ArenaNet, that's right. I'm holding your feet to the fire. You got to fix the bugs. You got to find some way to get the doppelganger back, making it work properly so that Mike can get his daily doppelganger in an easy and convenient fashion. Because bear in mind, the bugs that I encounter, right, that's mostly in instance content, open world content, PvP and world versus world. Think about all the bugs that just go unreported in story instances, because believe me, story instances definitely get bugged. Funnily enough, I was actually playing through the story on my Zero to Hero account, and I destroyed something, and something spawned on me, and I got trapped in it, and I couldn't escape. I had to reset the story. It's like a mushroom spawned on me, and I was unable to escape. It was like a 3D mushroom that I could not wriggle out of. It was very unfortunate, guys. It was rough. I didn't like it. It was a negative experience. It was a negative experience, guys, that I had in Guild Wars 2. But that's about it. I believe that is more or less the patch review. Wow. That was a big one, guys. That was a pretty big patch. Even though I don't consider it to be super game-changing in any particular way, it was mostly just like, it was a lot of changes though, right? A lot of things have happened, right? Overall, a whole bunch of stuff got added to talk about. But there it is. We made it to the end. Goodness me, what an adventure. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think. Tell me how you feel about the patch. I want to know your thoughts. I want to know your takes. I want to hear your unhinged, lunatic takes, actually, guys. That's what I really want to hear about. So make sure that you make yourself heard in the comments section. And of course, if you're on YouTube, make sure to follow this. I do this live. If you want to get ahead of the other YouTube, you want to be ahead of the other YouTube viewers. You want to say, "Ooh, I already know about this video. I was there. I've got the upper hand over you." Then you should definitely follow the stream, twitch.tv/MightyTeapot, and get in on the action. Okay? Be the ultimate viewer. Be the ultimate gamer. Wow. And of course, subscribe on YouTube. Like the video. Leave a comment. Follow all of my social media. Join my Discord and complain about the patch. Or praise the patch. Argue with people who have different views to you. One of the many pleasures in life. Okay? But anyway, that's about it. Thanks for watching, gamers. I'll see you next time.